Welcome back to the We See Monsters channel. I'm your host Jenna, and today we have an interesting story about a woman who was basically coexisting with some type of cryptid creature on her property. I wish I was that brave to try and make contact with something that was hiding out in the woods of my own backyard, but honestly, I'm not. I'd rather admire cryptids from afar. Anyways, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please hit the subscribe button. I typically upload shorts and longer stories from Tuesday to Saturday, and I don't want you guys to miss out on all the fun. With that being said, let's jump into this week's story. I'd been living in my house for about a year before the knocking started. It didn't happen very often, probably once every 6 to 8 weeks. There would only be 1 or 2 knocks each time, and they always came from the woods behind my house. I never got a close-up view of what made them, and what few glances I managed were always obscured by trees or other cover. It was broadly sized, a solid dark color, and appeared to stand upright. I nicknamed it Whoop because that's exactly how the weird call it seemed to make sounded. I definitely heard its whooping more often than the knocking. I'd always try to answer, but could never get another reply. Now, I'm sure what you're thinking, and before all this happened, I never thought or knew much about things like Bigfoot, ghosts, or the paranormal. And to reiterate, I still don't know what whoop even is, because I never got an actual clear visual. If anything like that existed, I thought it just added more mystery to this world. I came out here to live a quiet, simple life. I don't want fame, attention, or publicity, and figured Whoop wanted the same. Provided we kept our boundaries, I thought the two of us could have a peaceful coexistence. Shortly after the knocks began, my garden and animal pen started getting raided at night. It only happened once every so often, but something would pillage my crops, fruit trees, even steal 1 or 2 of my farm animals. My garden and pens can keep out animals of all sizes, but since whatever was doing this still managed to slip in and out with ease, I quickly realized it was Whoop. I tried using trail cameras to catch an image of it, and as a potential deterrent. It worked at first, but Whoop eventually found a way around the cameras, and if it had to, smashed or knocked them off their posts. After this happened a few more times, it became evident that Whoop's nighttime visits occurred on the same days I heard the knocking. Discovering this correlation made me pay closer attention to the details of Whoop's nocturnal marauding, which made me notice another pattern. It always either ransacked the garden or animal pens, and never did both on the same night. When I aligned the number of knocks heard each time and which section was raided, another pattern became clear. 1 knock meant the garden, and 2 meant the pens. The knocks, I thought, have to mean it was hungry, and whether it wanted meat or plants. The next time I heard Whoop's knocking, I put that theory to the test. It was a single loud knock that came around dusk and was actually followed by a quick whoop about 15 minutes later. 1 knock should mean the garden, so I filled a bowl with fruits, vegetables, grain, nuts, and laid them out on a large flat rock about 20 yards into the tree line. I was hoping an offering like this could be my way of letting Whoop know I understood its message, and it would in turn stay out of my garden. Sure enough, it worked. I saw no signs of any disturbances in my garden the next morning, and everything I left for it on the rock was gone. This became my protocol whenever I heard the knocking, and it worked every time. A few months later, my boyfriend Jesse moved in with me, and the knocking stopped. Nothing happened for about 5 to 6 months, and I figured Whoop must have left the area. I told Jesse about the knocking and offerings that I would leave for Whoop. Naturally, he was skeptical about it, and when nothing happened those first few months after he moved in, it was hard to not blame him for thinking I was crazy. But then, out of nowhere, the knocking resumed. I was sitting on my back patio one evening, admiring the diamond necklace Jesse surprised me with when he came home earlier that day. It had a silver chain and heart-shaped diamond charm that was light pink in color with gold edging, and glimmered in the sunset's rays. I actually jumped upon hearing the knocking, clear as day, and coming no more than 50 feet from inside the tree line. I should have been delighted to hear a sign from Whoop, but something was oddly different about these knocks that just didn't sit right. This time, there were 3. 3 deep, hollow-sounding knocks. The first 2 were practically back-to-back, but the third came a few seconds later, throwing me off guard. Whoop never knocked 3 times before, I thought. What did 3 mean? Hoping to cover all the bases, I laid out a spread of fruits, vegetables, even included fish, sweets, and other random items on the offering rock. Jesse didn't hear the knocking when it happened, but played along anyway, despite emphatically reiterating his skepticism. When I woke up the next morning, there didn't seem to be any disturbances in the garden or pens. It looked like my offering worked, or so I thought. Upon stepping outside, I spotted something on my back patio. It was a large clump of thick, dark brown hair that I noticed had a streak of pink highlighting. I went to pick it up, but immediately dropped it and stumbled back into the kitchen, struggling to maintain my balance while comprehending what I just saw. There was more than just hair in that clump. It was an entire human scalp. I sprung into the living room to get Jesse and spilled onto the floor upon entering. I could only frantically point towards the kitchen's back door and sputter panicked gibberish until Jesse managed to calm my nerves by firmly holding me in place. Jesse looked more confused than worried. He got me onto the couch, saying he'd check it out, but wanted me to stay put until he returned. I heard Jesse open the kitchen door and step outside, where he remained for about 5 minutes, which to me felt like hours. I was flooded with relief upon hearing Jesse step back inside and make his way down the hall, but he gave me an answer I didn't expect. "There's nothing out there," Jesse said as he re-entered the living room. "What exactly did you see?" Despite what he said, Jesse's face had almost no color, and he wore his flustered, petrified expression, looking like he just saw a ghost. The worry on Jesse's face made me feel horrible for scaring him like this, but there was no disputing what I saw. "Jesse, when I went outside, there was a clump of hair out on the patio. Not just hair, but an entire human fucking scalp. It must have been placed there by something." I brought up calling the police, but Jesse quickly interjected. "What are you gonna tell them? The thing that lives in the woods behind my house put a human scalp on my back patio and then took it back?" Jesse asked with a noticeable tinge of sarcasm. "Even if they don't think you're crazy, they can't do anything without proof, and according to you, it vanished." Jesse wasn't fond of the law, but he made a point. Despite my reluctance, I went back outside with Jesse to poke around, but found no trace of a human scalp. It was moved, I thought. There was only one animal around here that could have done it with such impeccable covertness, and if that was the case, The prospect of it being able to get that close without me knowing still keeps me up at night. When I checked the offering rock, nothing I left out was touched, which made me even more unsettled. Jesse tried convincing me I mistook it for something else, but again, I knew what I saw. Jesse managed to put me down for a nap later that day. It was dusk when I woke up, and despite regaining some composure, I felt no less on edge. The house, I noticed, contained an eerie stillness. I called for Jesse, but he didn't respond. I went downstairs and found a note from Jesse in the kitchen, saying he had to make an emergency shipment for work and that he'd be gone for a few days. Jesse was a truck driver and traveled a lot, so last-minute jobs springing up like this weren't uncommon. I tried calling his phone, but it went straight to voicemail, which also wasn't unusual since the reception outside of town was subpar at best, and stayed like that for quite a while. Nonetheless, I was now completely alone in this house, and at a time when the last thing I wanted was to be by myself. I thought about leaving, but it was already dark, and I didn't even feel comfortable venturing beyond my front door. Before going to bed, I made sure every light in the house was on, and any opening or entrance was closed and locked. Remarkably, the night passed without incident. Although the next few days were uneventful, I still couldn't get in touch with Jesse. Whenever I called, his phone kept going to voicemail. Although he claimed not to find anything, the expression on Jesse's face that morning said differently. I feared Jesse actually saw the severed scalp, maybe even caught a glimpse of Whoop, and was so spooked it made him leave. Most of his belongings were still here though, and it was too uncharacteristic of him to be so unreachable, so I was assuming the worst. While trying to make sense of Jesse's abrupt departure, I continued obsessing over Whoop's gruesome gift, and a few days later, the questions I had about it were answered. The police showed up one morning and said they had to use my backyard so they can access a crime scene in the woods behind my house. Turns out, some hikers stumbled across 5 bodies at the bottom of a ravine about 1 mile away from my house. Investigators said the bodies were initially buried, but got dug up by some sort of large animal. It not only exhumed all 5 corpses, but apparently ate and dismembered large sections of their bodies. I was certain Whoop committed these grisly killings, and my suspicions were confirmed after seeing a photo of one victim. Her name was Heather, and she'd been missing for about 2 months. She had a pretty face with gleaming green eyes and beautiful dark brown hair, which contained a prominent pink highlight streak. That human scalp I found the other day, it belonged to that woman. But then, the case took a different turn. Despite the body's battered conditions, investigators managed to identify all 5 victims. They were mostly prostitutes, junkies, and drifters, and they were all from different parts of the country and had no connections to our town or surrounding area. Autopsies revealed every one of them died by strangulation and blunt force trauma, which to me still implicated Whoop. There still had to be some sort of underlying connection, explaining why these victims wound up here, of all places. And I found that link when looking at the picture of another victim. When I saw it, my feet almost buckled. The necklace this woman wore in her photo was a silver chain with a heart-shaped light pink diamond and gold edging, and it was the same one that I got from Jesse. Whoop didn't kill those people. It was Jesse. I went to the police and told them about the necklace, but I didn't say anything about the human scalp. They searched my house and found a stash of random items belonging to all 5 victims, which they said were probably trophies Jesse kept as mementos, likely as a way to remember the murder. I never heard from Jesse again, who's still at large. Detectives think he could also be behind some of the other unsolved disappearances and murders that happened in spots along his trucking route, and they are still investigating. Jesse must have encountered these people along his trucking routes and brought the bodies back here to be buried. It's unclear if Jesse held them captive before killing them, or did it immediately and hauled their corpses around, both of which are equally disturbing scenarios. Looking back at the day Jesse left, I think he did see the human scalp and disposed of it himself after realizing it came from one of his victims. Jesse did flee, but only to avoid getting caught. Whoop was the catalyst behind his departure, but not because it was trying to protect or give me a warning. It just wanted to eat. Whoop must have came across Jesse's burial site on its own or following Jesse during one of his drop-offs. This also made me realize what 3 knocks meant. It was hungry for human meat. After eating those bodies, Whoop must have developed a taste for human flesh. And here's why I'm certain that's the case. One night last weekend, a solo camper went missing in the same stretch of woods behind my house. On the same evening of her disappearance, I heard 3 loud knocks coming from the woods. For more spooky content, you can click the links below to check out my TikTok and listen to the We See Monsters podcast.